the House passed a bill that I think it's young men 18 to 25, you're automatically registered with selective service. So a lot of people don't care what happens in the military. They're like, hey, it'll never affect me. Ask yourself, why would they pass something to make it your child automatically be registered with selective service? Is you may not have a choice, right? Is how are you going to protect your son when he's drafted and has to join the military because they can't get that number that they need? Then how will you protect them from false allegations and wrongful convictions?
Safe houses and underground railroads, my friend.
Well, here's another thing.
We've been moving some children around.
Listen,
let my people go. All right.
This is what
I'm not even kidding.
This is what needs to take place. All right. If you want to have a volunteer military, you got to overhaul the regulations, because the regulations were put in place for draft military. The two do not coincide. There needs to be put, additional safeguards in to keep people from getting railroaded like this. Period. And another thing, you can't have 98% of the JAG working for the command, because all you're going to do is just crucify soldiers. You should increase the JAG so it's 50-50, 50% defending the soldier, 50% representing the command. Otherwise, fuck off.
So one thing, you're right, and some things that we're working for, and I went to a conference today, is something called a conviction integrity unit. So there's a conviction integrity unit and an innocence project. So every single American is protected by one or both of those, except people in the U.S. military. They can go back and look at an old case and get it overturned, get it righted. So we're fighting. There's a group called the Defense Advisory Committee for investigations, prosecutions, and defense of sexual assaults, sexual harassments. They also do DV. We're pushing to get a conviction integrity unit, but the military doesn't want it. They do not want that because they don't want to highlight their dirty laundry, as it were. But
I was about to say, the reason that they don't want it is because of all of the things that will come to light, cases like we're talking about here tonight.
Right.
Yeah. Listen, all right. First of all, I've always been that guy who would raise his hand and say, this shit's fucked up. I mean, it cost me my sergeant major rank, and I've got my ass chewed, mightily in the military because, I ran top cover for a lot of dudes, and I can't, there's probably at least a half a dozen instances where I knew that said soldier was going to get ran up the flagpole and screwed 3 ways to Sunday. And I would show up and be like, okay, like we had it wasn't a bad shoot at a checkpoint, but there was a shooting at a checkpoint in Iraq where the individual did not follow the signs and was literally, doing like, I think 50 miles an hour when he came through the last distance before he had to use deadly force. They lit up the car. There was I think there's 2 women, a dude, and a child in the car, and they were going to basically court-martial these individuals at the checkpoint. Well, I got some pictures of the car and what was in the car, and I brought it to the battalion commander. I said, this is a gun. And he goes, no, Sergeant, that is a toy. At 60 miles an hour, where people can get turned to red paste in seconds, that's a gun. And yes, you can court-martial them. They'll be found not guilty, and then I'll make sure that I burn your career to the ground. And guess who did not get court-martialed?
Yeah, good.
Those guys. But there's all kinds of NCOs that are not willing to do that. Most officers are just they want to punch their ticket and move up the rank. They don't give a shit about their soldiers, and it's absolutely disgusting. And that is probably one of the main reasons behind all of these horrible stories that you're bringing up here.
And that reminds me of another horrible story. We have, it was a female Navy type. She was an E6 at the time. So she's a YN, a yeoman, but she was a paralegal at this command. She saw 500 cases of false allegations and wrongful convictions. So wow. She reported to her chain of command, and she was the number 1 E6. So you're talking about NCOs like you did stepping up. What do you think happened when she stepped up?
Oh, they crucified her.
They probably crucified her.
She got fired. And then it took her forever to make E7, and then she never went past E7. She retired, and then she did an interview for us. She was on a Navy ship. She overheard 3 women who wanted to get off the ship conspiring to falsely accuse one guy because they found out they all slept with the same guy. So is he a Romeo? Yes. Is he Cavalier? Okay, that's not illegal. So they conspire. She's in the berthing listening. She goes to her command. They do nothing. She goes to the JAG. They do nothing. She goes to the IG. They do nothing. She did an interview with us. We have it posted. But that's the type of stuff you talk about. NCOs and officers willing to step up is good luck finding them, right? They're like finding an oyster,
a pearl in an oyster farm.
Pearl in an oyster farm, like with no oysters in it, right? Yeah. It's like it's just rare. So what you did was amazing, standing up for people, and I'm telling you that happens so infrequently now that people are surprised when they see it.
Yeah, right? I've done it a couple times for some whoas that were getting divorced. Like these commanders, like, you will give her this much of your pay, blah blah blah. That's undue command influence. Mm-hmm. You should never give them more than your BAH. I think that's in the regs. And that was probably 4 or 5 times where I would go in the commander's office and like, sir, I'm just going to correct you here because if he decides to drop paper on you, you're totally exposed. You're going to fucking yourself.
So you'll appreciate this next story.
Okay. So
this guy was an Army. He was a chief warrant officer, helicopter pilot. So his wife's an officer, West Point grad. They're separated. So she comes to his house, even though she's got a restraining order. And she puts a gun to his head.
What the?
Yeah. Okay.
She puts a gun. She's been drinking, and he subdues her. He gets convicted, among other things, of that assault. And then years later, they said, you know what? We shouldn't have done that. They give him like 17 years in prison. They took a whole 30 days off, right? Don't stay in your seats a whole 30 days. She forced his name on a check, and his father sent that in so she could be prosecuted. And the military said, well, you got the money back, so we're not going to do it. I mean, just some of these stories, when you hear them, I get it. It's hard to believe. But if you allow yourself to review the evidence and to listen to what the troops are saying, you will be amazed and surprised at a level that I can't even put into words.
Well, here's the thing, though, is they made my attorney sign a non-disclosure agreement. He was a civilian fucking attorney because they wanted to pad their convictions. And the only reason I didn't get royally slam-fucked is I told the truth, and the colonel who was in charge of whether that Golmar went into my permanent file or the temporary file actually read my information, read my case, looked at the evidence, and put it in my temporary file. Otherwise, I would have been fucked.
Watch Grunt Speak live every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to join Popp for Supporter Sundays, go to redonkulous.com/donate and make a monthly pledge. A link is in the Meat Gazer box.